Welcome once again to the S.E.M podcast. Jack and Zach are here once again tonight, and we are joined from the Valley of the Sun. Okay, maybe not quite the Valley of the Sun, but from the land of Arizona, our friend Evan Slade. Evan, how are you, my friend?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm good. Where exactly are you calling from tonight?
So with Santan Valley, it's kind of, I grew up in Mesa, but it's south of there, like maybe about 15 minutes away. We are like 45 minutes from Phoenix.
Okay. So like if you were to say I'm in this town or city, what's the town that you're in?
So Santan Valley, that's the actual name of the city.
Oh,
so
really?
We're just right next to Queen Creek. That's the bigger city next to us. So
okay, very nice. Awesome. Well, we appreciate you coming on. I understand you've been listening to the podcast, and
yeah, I even listened to President Frederick today, and then a little bit of Drew Allen's.
Awesome. Love it. Well, good. Then you're familiar with our format. We'll talk pre-mission and then jump over the mission, talk about life since you've been home, and then we'll go through the mission. So the floor is yours, Evan.
Do you mind if I present?
Yeah, you can. Absolutely. Not a problem.
Let's see which window.
I think it's the arrow. There you go.
So I just want to say, first off, President Frederick's and Sister Frederick's podcast was so amazing. I love them so much. But my story doesn't really begin with my mission. This is a picture of my great-grandparents. They were born and raised in Aberdeen.
Really?
And, yeah. These are the missionaries that taught them the gospel. And they were both from Arizona. And then this is my great-grandfather, George, being baptized in the D River.
Oh my gosh.
This is a picture of them and their family, my grandma, her sister, and my great-grandma.
Oh my gosh. What a cool piece of ancestral history that you got there. That's amazing.
So they joined the church in 1932. And it was more so on my grandmother, my great-grandmother. She wanted to learn about the gospel. They saw the missionaries, and she got baptized first. And then my great-grandfather got baptized the next day.
Okay. Wow.
So, and this is my grandma. One cool thing about my great-grandparents is that my great-grandpa was the branch president in Aberdeen during World War II. And then my great-grandmother was the Relief Society president during World War II as well. So George, he was a shipwright out in the docks in Aberdeen, and he would go to the pub every once in a while with his friends just to socialize. He didn't drink, obviously. But one night he said, I'm not going to go to the pub. I'm just going to go straight home. The next day, he walked right past that pub, and all of his friends that had gone to, and it was during World War II, and there was a bombing raid, and it blew up that pub. And so,
oh my goodness,
amazing, faith fulfilling, like their hard work protected them. Also during the bombing raids, my great grandmother would go and do these wellness checks on the members of the branch. And so during the raids, the sirens would be going, and she'd check every single house to make sure everyone was all right and if they needed anything. So they had a lot of faith. One of the things of faith that they decided was they wanted their two daughters to marry someone with the priesthood. And at the time, there weren't a lot of members. So they decided we're going to move to America. And those two missionaries, one of them actually sponsored them, and they moved. My great-grandfather, my grandmother, and my aunt moved to Arizona. And then my grandma actually had to stay in Scotland because she was sick. She had pleurisy. They put her in a TB ward of all places. Like,
oh, wow.
You don't want to go there. Anyway, so she got engaged while she was there and didn't have any intent to go to Arizona. Well, that man died. And she's like, maybe this is a sign that I need to go to Arizona. She got on a boat and then traveled all the way across the U.S. by train and met up with their family in Arizona, and saw my my grandfather, and then they started dating and got married.
It's amazing. What a story.
One of the funny things though with my great grandfather, since he's a shipwright, he worked on ships, and he's in Boston. He was the first one to come over. The customs guy's like, "Hey, where are you going?" "We're going to Arizona." And he's like, "Why are you doing that? You're a shipwright. Shouldn't you be out here working in the docks and stuff like that?" And he's like, he points outside. It's the middle of the winter. He's like, "I'm not. That's why all the snow's coming down. I'm going to Arizona to beat that. I've had enough of this." So it's kind of crazy.
Wow, what a cool story. So is that a picture of you with your grandmother down in the corner there?
Yeah. So she had all these different trinkets from Scotland and a family crest. Interesting thing is my uncle Fred also served in Scotland in the 70s, and then my dad's cousin Bruce also served in Scotland in the 70s around the same time. And they were never companions, but they served around each other. So
that's amazing.
I grew up eating like Scotch broth. She made the best sausage rolls, shortbread. We had music, all the Scottish literature. If I were to show you a picture to the right of that fireplace, she had a wall of books and a whole section about like British literature, Scottish literature, Robert Louis Stevenson, Sir Walter Scott, and Shakespeare, and all the classics. Robert Burns. I actually have where'd it go? She had this hanging up in her house. It's the Selkirk Grace. Okay. And it's some him eat and cannot eat, and some would eat that want it. But we him eat and we can eat and say the Lord be thank it. So she had that all over her house. So yeah, I grew up with all the stories, and when I was 5, I told my parents and everyone that I was going to go to Scotland on my mission. And they're like, ever since then, people would tell me, "Oh, you're not going to go there. You're casting doubt and all that kind of stuff." And I just, when I got the call, it was the greatest manifestation that God knew me, and I don't know if I could ever replace that. And it was such an amazing experience. But I remember listening to Zach Clark and talking about how much he wanted to be a good missionary. So stuff that I did to prepare, I read the Book of Mormon maybe about 27 times before the mission. And then I Preach My Gospel. And after high school, I would go out with the missionaries and teach. There was one time we were helping out at the Easter pageant in Mesa. And we got this instruction from the mission president that everyone's going to be sitting in these lawn chairs, and you don't want to be standing above them, and you want to get down to the level and teach by kneeling and asking them if they knew anyone that we could teach or something like that. So I used that later on, and I'll get to that story, but just lots of opportunity for me to learn. Something about me that's kind of embarrassing, but we weren't very wealthy, but as a kid, I chipped my tooth, like right here. We were in primary, and the teacher hadn't gotten there, and we were like, "Oh, let's play a prank on this teacher." So we hid behind the teacher, and we hid behind chairs, and I pulled the chair back, and I chipped my tooth, and I had that for probably 11 years. And I looked like Lloyd Christmas from Dumb and Dumber. So it kind of, it made me a little bit awkward. It made me like not very good at speaking with people, very shy. But I had braces, and I got it fixed, and that helped me there. But so I had to go overcome all those issues. I also wanted to bring up some people that helped me prepare for my mission. One of them his name was Nat Clarkson. He was in my ward, and he kind of took me under his wing and let me work for him. We did stonemasonry. We put veneer on walls, and he helped me out so much to learn a little bit about life before the mission. But one thing he did is he opened up a savings account with me, and he said, "Whatever you put in there, I'm going to match." So I pretty much tried to save everything that I could, and he definitely helped us.
Wow.
Another person that was pretty instrumental in before my mission, his name was Juan Zapata. He bought all my missionary clothes, my suits. We did a lot of service for him. He suffered from what's it called? I'm trying to remember what it is. I wrote it down. It was viral meningitis or fungal meningitis that was attacking his brain, and so he couldn't get on the ladder to put his Christmas lights up, and so we would go do that for him every year and do yard work. So, so when I submitted my papers, I put them in around June 2007, and about 2 weeks later, I got my call. And as a kid, I played volleyball,
Mhm.
and I coached after that. And so I got my call when I was at practice. So I opened my call in front of my sister and my mom. My dad was on a camping trip. Some people just like open in front of family. I just kind of wanted to keep it to myself. And at that time, I didn't think I was going to go to Scotland at all. I didn't have doubt. I didn't even put it on my papers. I just said my grandmother's from Scotland. And I had these really strong impressions and dreams that I was going to be serving in Italy or Polynesia. And then like I said, the most amazing thing, I opened the call and I read Scotland, Edinburgh Mission. It was that testimony building that God and Jesus Christ knew me. So anyway, I'd be going to the MTC in November. About a month before that, I decided I'm not going to work. I don't want to deal with getting any tickets. I don't want to get hurt because I was having friends that were skateboarding, and there's a big hill out near this place called Placendas, and they take these longboards and they just go bomb them. And one kid broke his leg and he couldn't go, and then finally decided I'm not going to go on a mission. So anyway, I didn't want that to happen to me. So I decided I'm done with work. I'm just going to go to the temple every week, prepare for my mission, go out with the missionaries and all that kind of stuff. So after the mission, I even talked to President Griffiths about this. He's like questioning about it, but I started professional flight around Arizona and some of Nevada. So this is a flight I took to Sedona. It's an interesting flight because it's on a mesa. On the two ends of the runway, there's a drop off. So you have to either do a short field takeoff and land when you're out there. So I married my wife in 2011 in June. We've been married for almost 13 years, 12 years. And we have 4 kids, Sterling, Sadie, Finley, and Harrison. Sterling named after the place, Finley named after my great-grandparents. This is my grandmother's funeral. In 2015, she died of Alzheimer's. And that I did buy a kilt when I was out there, and that's kind of the reason why I bought it, is I knew that she'd pass away. I have a picture of myself and with my wife. We took some wedding pictures, but I didn't wear it to like any of the receptions or anything like that. But that's my uncle that served in Scotland, and that's my cousin Bruce, and that's my grandmother's sister Ella. She actually died of the same illness 3 years ago. So one of the coolest things we got to do a couple years ago is to go back. It was COVID was ending. We got this notification via flights from home. Oh, I guess I forgot something. I went to ASU and I got my aviation management degree from ASU, and then I got an MBA from Washington State a couple years ago. And then I'm currently working for Northrop Grumman we're supporting the Sentinel program, the replacement for the Minuteman III missile. It's been a really interesting aspect in our what we're doing, but and I glossed over another huge thing in my life. My wife and I couldn't have kids. It's very similar to Matt Fissler, but we couldn't have kids for 5 years, and we had to go through in vitro. And what Matt's doing is really cool, doing that foundation. But we had twins at our second round, so we had to do it twice, and then we had to do it twice again for Finley. And then a huge miracle in our life, Harrison was born without any assistance. So, and it was a huge miracle in our life. God does bless us, and in many ways we don't understand. But anyway, I'm so grateful for my family and the way that Heavenly Father has given us many opportunities to receive blessings. Let's see, what was I talking about? So we went and took a trip. As COVID was ending, we saw a notification from Flights from Home. It said you could fly to Inverness for $380 round trip. And I was like, oh yeah, we're going. Because that's like what, a quarter of the cost.
Yep.
And there was another guy that I was watching on YouTube. His name is Steve Marsh. I don't know if you've watched any of his videos, but he does some of the most amazing videos around Scotland. Like it's not like historical, but he does all these like scenic routes around. Anyway, so I saw a video of him going to Shetland, and I was like, this is amazing. He got on the ship in Aberdeen and flew all the way, or drove all the way to Shetland on the boat. So I was like, we are doing this. So this is actually my grandmother's house in Aberdeen. It's not this door, but it's on the downstairs. So we got to go to her family home, and it was, I want to say it's pretty close to, what's it called? I didn't serve in Aberdeen, but I think it's Union Street.
Yeah.
So,
that's cool.
And then we went to Dundee. This is the Law Hill, and you can see the Firth of Tay out that kind of flows out into the ocean. Carnoustie.
That's awesome.
And this is Shetland. I don't know if you've ever, in our mission at the time, they didn't have any missionaries up in Shetland, but there's a branch. My wife was so cold. She had her mask on the whole time. She had a scarf wrapped around her. The wind was so strong in Shetland. And one of the claims to fame there is they don't have any trees that are naturally grown because it's so windy and there's all the salt air. But this is a really cool area. My great-grandfather, or not my great-great-great-grandmother was born in Shetland. And her dad was the Laird of Sumborough, which is right where this is. The house, you can go up to it. And then one day, either him or his dad, there was this big storm, and it uncovered this Viking settlement. And you can walk around the settlement and see all the artifacts.
Wow.
So I've got like distant cousins that still live in Shetland, and we got to this guy. His name was George, but he asked us to call him Pundy or something like that. I can't remember, but he drove us around with his cousin Jimmy, and we got to meet their family and have lunch with them. It's such an amazing place. You can actually go up there, and there's a place called St. Ninian's Beach, and the low tide will come out, and you can walk from one island to the next.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. And we got to see seals and all that. It was crazy.
It's amazing.
So when we got back, we headed straight for St. Andrews. We ate lunch with Sister Maitland from Glenrothes. Just got on the Slicken Bridge, went to Falkirk for the Kelpies, Stirling, Edinburgh Castle, the Mission Home, George Square. And I went and visited the Greenock branch because I served there the longest for 7.5 months. This is Stephen Cox and Jim Bowie. Stephen was in the branch presidency at the time when I was serving there, and now he's the branch president. And this is his wife, Loriana, and that's Sister Heron, Maggie Heron, and Sister Murray. One of the coolest places in Greenock is up on this. It's called the Lyle Hill, and you can see the Inverclyde as it spits out into the ocean. Dunoon across the water, and then you can get up to the Isle of Bute. And we ended our trip out at Isle of Skye, and this is called the Old Manor Store. If you ever go back, that is probably one of the coolest views and places to hike up to. Aileen Donan. And one of the things that our family used to say is haste you back. And it was just, come back, you're a friend to us, and all that kind of stuff. So before I served my mission, we all have this like anticipation of like what Scotland is. And then we got to Scotland and we're like, what is this place? Just craziness. So if for those that are listening, it says what people think Scotland is like versus what it's actually like. So you have the guy that's in the Piper in Tartan, but then you on the picture on the right, it has this guy hanging from a light pole. So
definitely in Glasgow.
Right.
It's amazing.
So just we flew from Arizona. There was two other missionaries that were flying to the Preston MTC with me. One was this elder, his name is Elder Payne from Winslow, and another elder from Gilbert, I think is Elder Davies. He was going to a different mission. But just pictures of the MTC. You'll see Drew Allen, Elder Rose, Elder Mulford. I can't remember his name because he went to a different mission, but yeah, the Preston Temple as well to the right. I had a pretty good group. We had a lot of, I want to say, top-notch elders in my group. Elder Black, Elder Burnett, Elder Rouche, Elder Rose. I'm trying to think of who else am I missing. I think that's pretty much it. So one thing about when you start your mission, at least when we started, we went up to the Arthur Seat. There's kind of two stories about that. One's about King Arthur. The other one's about, I think it's Orson Pratt that came and dedicated the mission on Arthur's Seat. And so the members of the church call it Pratt's Hill. So we would dedicate our missions and then we would close our missions going up Arthur's Seat. So I also pulled up Google Earth. I don't know if anyone's done this yet. Let's see if I can find it to kind of give an idea of what Scotland is like. So you got the capital. This is Arthur's Seat, and you got Calton Hill, and then you have the castle is just over here, and you have Princess Street, Royal Mile. Anyway, there's 5 zones in the mission. You have Edinburgh, Glasgow, Paisley, Dundee, and Aberdeen. Aberdeen's the largest because it covers all of this. And then Glasgow and Paisley are probably your more smaller ones. And Edinburgh was pretty big because it covered all of this. And then Glasgow was just this portion. Anyway, I never served in Edinburgh itself, but I was in the Edinburgh zone at the last little bit. Okay. When I came in, you just felt so loved by President Frederick and Sister Frederick. And I am so grateful that I was able to serve with them. I went and visited him in February, and that's how I learned about the podcast. I called him up. I was like, "Hey, I'm doing a work trip. I'm up in Utah. Can I come visit you?" And he said, "Yeah, come over at this time." We went to dinner. He took me to a family basketball game. It was West High versus I can't remember I know it's East High versus another team. I can't remember the name,
Hmm.
but I met all his family. They were so nice. One thing about President Frederick is that he talked about this. He loves to learn. We went up to his library or his office upstairs, and he had church history books all over the room. And he talks about how he spent $35 to buy a church history book for his wedding or something like that. And he just studies, and he also archives. He's doing a lot of family history work. The one thing though that impressed me, crazy, he had all of his documentation from the mission in several binders. And he said, he quizzed me. He's like, so where were you June of this such and such? And I was like, oh, I was in Brodie Ferry. And he pulled it up. And he's like, yep, you're in Brodie Ferry. I was like, I want that book when you die or something like that. And so, but one of the gifts that he gave me was President Nelson's anthology of all of his talks. He collected them all so that when he became prophet, he read them all. And I wanted that as well. So he let me have that.
Wow.
My first companion was Elder Justin Van Leuven. And I don't know if you met him, but he is America. And he would be so proud of it. He was America. And he was just always talking about like him on the farm in Northern California, and just he loved life, loved America. So I skipped some stuff about President Frederick. There was one thing that was going around about his cayenne and vinegar drink. Did you ever see him drink that? I never saw him.
I've heard that rumor before, but I never saw him.
I asked him and I asked his kids about it, and he's like, yeah, we tried it and we were like, we can't do this. Like I don't know how he stomached that, but I think some of the assistants tried it as well, but I can't remember. Some of the teachings that President Frederick, he always talked about was the funnel. Just keep filling that funnel. If people fall out, at least you're still filling that funnel and keep it filled. He had these different levels of heat, and comparing that to who are you? Are you this flickering heat, or are you this bright blue heat? And then he would always talk about explosions. Later on in his mission, he talked about agency. We need to use our agency. We need to have faith. And that was so important. We need to allow people to use their agency as well, like members and investigators. There was one story from Sister Frederick that she would tell, and this kind of helped me a lot. There was a time in my mission that I was kind of like, I am doing all this work and they're not really seeing much fruit. And one thing that took me back from President Frederick's thing today was that he thought he was going to go home. I don't know. I've never heard that before. That was crazy.
Yeah.
Like for someone so spiritual, I would have never had doubt about his missionary service. Anyway, so Sister Frederick would talk about improving health, but this one story, she came up into a zone conference. I think it was in Paisley at the time. She talked about how God has asked you to push this rock. He didn't say where. He just kind of push on the rock, and we would be like, "Oh, we're not going anywhere?" And God didn't ask you to push it anywhere. He just said, "Push the rock," and Jesus Christ placed that rock somewhere. And so that was that story. We're not entirely doing things because we have a point. We're doing it because the Lord wants us to. So
like where was your first area, Evan, with Justin?
So my first area was Coatbridge.
Okay.
Just outside of Glasgow. I got on the mission and we hit he was going to be this person was going to be my first baptism, but it was going to be the goal for the mission. is John O'Rourke, 238. He was going to be baptized by this person. He was in the ward, but he he got chickened out because it was December and he didn't want to go in the water. So we didn't have anyone small enough to fit in his jumpsuit except for Elder Lucas. So Christian got in the water and baptized him.
Awesome.
And then my first appointment was with this family called the Broadley family, Ainsley, Stephen, and Elaine. Their daughter was having a rough time, and the parents were like, okay, maybe we should get the missionaries over. And we started teaching them and helped them with their testimonies. They eventually immigrated to the U.S., first in California and then in Utah. I got to go to that wedding, and I got to wear my kilt there. So
Awesome.
It was pretty amazing. My next baptism was Karen Ward. She was from Brigton, and that was kind of my first experience of a very central Glaswegian person. And I was like, wow, this is nuts. This is not how my grandmother speaks or anything like that. And I didn't have a very hard time with the language, like Scots and the accent, but just Glaswegian was very different for me. So when I told you about learning to get down to people's level from the Mesa Mission president, there was this Christmas Eve or this Christmas Eve or some type of event, or Hogmanay, and this was a miracle. I don't know how this happened, but this is Sean Mackay. I don't know if you've ever heard about Sean Mackay, but he suffered from schizophrenia. And this is his mom, and she was very nice. And she was at this Hogmanay, very loud. Couldn't really hear her. She couldn't really hear us. But I got down onto her level and was talking to her and acknowledging her. And she really took to that and really respected that. And she told Sean that I think I'm ready to learn about the church. And if it wasn't for that teaching from that Mesa Mission president, I don't know what would happen. She actually died maybe a few years later, but she joined the church, and I think she even went to the temple.
That's cool.
That's great.
So there's a kind of a funny story with Elder Van Leuven. I don't know if this was implemented in your time, but every Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Boxing Day, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, we could watch movies, right? But it had to be like with the member, or there was some stipulation each zone would make. And then some missionaries would abuse that. But anyway, Elder Van Leuven, he's like, hey, we're going to go see this movie. And I was like, oh, where? At the theater. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, I got approval. And I was like, okay, my first like 3 or 4 weeks in the mission. And I was like, yeah, right. Anyway, he was pretty insistent, and you won't guess what movie this is, but we went and saw Enchanted. I don't probably one of the lamest movies I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, afterwards, I was like, so this is so dumb. I couldn't believe that we wasted our time to go see this movie. And anyway, but it was nice to get some popcorn, even though I'd only been in the mission for maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And I just went to the movies before that. Anyway, it was just kind of lame.
I gotta call out Justin Van Leuven now. You've got to come
Right.
on the podcast and defend the reason of
Right.
why he wanted to go to Enchanted.
Maybe it was
did he fancy Amy Adams or
Patrick Dempsey?
Patrick Dempsey?
Yeah.
That's got to be it. Justin,
Right.
come on the podcast. We want to hear your side of that. That's amazing.
So this is the Broadleys right here. After Elder Van Leuven, I was only with them for 6 weeks, and that's something I wanted to ask you guys about. I trained, but I only trained for 6 weeks as well, twice. Was that kind of an MO? Like I don't know of any other missionaries that trained more than 6 weeks.
It may have been something in President Frederick's time frame.
Okay.
I trained Zach for 3 months.
Okay.
Yeah, we were together for 2 transfers. There was a couple of instances where greenies would get trained by their trainer for 3 transfers, but that was a very rare thing at that point in our time in the mission.
Okay. Well, I expected to be with him for a little bit longer. Anyway, so I became Elder O'Donoghue's companion. He was from Milford Haven, Wales, but he was born in Greenwich area of England, just outside of London. So he grew up in Wales. His family did farming. Really reserved, but really funny. I had a great time with him. He taught me a lot about Wales, Welsh words, so on and so on. It was about that time that President Hinckley passed away. And one of the most amazing experiences I had was when President Monson became the prophet. I was in the General Conference, and I don't know if anyone knows, in Scotland, the timing of conference is all whacked. We have to watch certain conferences at different times, and on Sunday we usually have like 3 or 4 sessions, or 4 or 5 sessions, or something like that. But I knew that President Monson was the prophet. The Spirit spoke to me, and I knew that as President Hinckley passed away, I was very sad, but I knew that the church would be in great hands with President Monson. So Elder O'Donoghue taught me about kebabs and how amazing they are, but I didn't listen the first time. So I should have let him order first. And I was thinking, okay, I'm going to be this cool guy. I'm going to order this really weird kebab. And I ordered it, and it was the most disgusting kebab I'd ever seen. And it was big chunks of this red, pinkish meat, and it was gross. And he got the doner kebab, and I was like, oh, I wanted that one. I don't know what I was doing. And I felt so sick that we probably had to go home, and I probably should have let him lead off. So next time I had a kebab, I knew what I was doing. So if you go to Scotland, get a kebab, get a munchie box. Anyway, we met this boy named John Russell. He had some learning difficulties, and one thing about the mission, it really got me out of my shell, helped me to teach to each person individually, as opposed to this rote thing. In the beginning, I wrote down everything on my note cards, had sticky notes. I was not a very good teacher until I kind of relaxed, and I'll talk about that later with Elder Harrison. He kind of got me out of my shell as well. He was an interesting person to teach. He couldn't read, and very slow, but he really enjoyed being with the youth. He then got baptized, and unfortunately, his family was not very keen on the church, and he stopped going because of the persecution. And you talked about that, like with President Frederick, the people in Scotland, they're very nice, but they have a lot of prejudice against certain religions, and it's crazy to have a family that
prejudice against things they don't understand.
Right. So
agreed.
But I really wished he had stayed. He had a lot of fun with the youth there. It was a good ward to have youth.
Sure.
So I don't know if you know about Coatbridge and Airdrie. Their church building is up on a hill, and you have to walk down to get to the train station to get to Coatbridge. So one day it was church. We were coming down the hill, and I am on the inside, and Alex is on the outside. And we saw these 3 guys walking up. And as they were approaching, I was like, great, we've got these non-educated delinquents, Neds. And I'm just trying to like walk real fast. And one of the guys, as we kind of meet up, he comes down, and he looks like he's adjusting his hoodie, comes down and whacks me right in the face. And I'm like, what just happened? And I talked to Elder O'Donoghue. He's like, I asked him, did you see that? He's like, no, I didn't see it. I was fuming. I was so mad. But honestly, we couldn't do anything. They would have ganged up on us if I had tried to start a fight or anything like that. But anyway, I just kind of let it go. I was like, is this really what it's like? So
I think you should count yourself fortunate that you stepped away, because we've heard plenty of stories of people standing up for themselves that got the wrong end of that. So,
I mean, you talk about Elder Black and Elder Harrison, like that's an intense story. So, I mean, at least I had other things that happened, like rocks and water balloons and other stuff like that. Crazy people stalking me at a bus stop. Like, I felt like it was a security threat too, because he's like, "Are you American? This dog hates you. He's gonna eat you," or something. It was crazy.
My goodness.
That's
just Glasgow. Another day in Glasgow.
Right. So Elder O'Donoghue and I, we had a lot of fun together. We'd play pranks, but some parts of Scotland took care of their towns and some parts didn't. But there were a lot of jobbies all around on the sidewalks. That's the Scottish term for poop. So we would be walking along and I would notice a jobby and I would nudge him so that he would like miss his step and then have to step on the jobby. And then he would do it to me too. And it was just really funny because we'd have this exchange, and sometimes I would get him really good and then he would get me. And then like, it's just really funny what we would do as missionaries. So I have a couple of shout outs to members. I don't know if this is ever going to get to them, but I really enjoyed working with the Broadleys, the Puries, the Dohertys, the Fifes. Bishop Fife is no longer living. He passed away a few years ago, but then Sean Mackay. There was one time with Sean Mackay, excuse me. He had a kind of a episode at the Preston Temple where he had a psychotic instance where they took his recommend away, and he came back and we were scared of him. We thought he was gonna like hurt us, because there were times when he would drive, he would do this with Elder Van Leuven because he'd be talking his ear off and it would upset him. And we were just walking one day or one night and we noticed that was Sean Mackay, and it looked like he was driving slow, like following us. And we booked it towards the Broadleys, their house, and we were like frantically knocking on the door and like, let us in. And we're like, Sean Mackay's chasing us. And they were laughing and like, it was just nuts. So,
wow.
They always like, whenever we go to the Broadleys, they always bring that up. So I was only in Coatbridge for 3 months. And I got transferred to Pollock and was serving with Elder S.E.M. Webb. And this is the only picture I have of him. It's so strange. I don't know where all my other pictures. And so just this profile of him on the bus in preparation day clothes. So he was from Bristol, and I thought he sounded like a pirate. And like, I don't know if you ever served with anyone from Bristol. I served with 2 people from Bristol and then 1 person from Wales. So all in that same kind of corner of the UK. And then, let's see, I served with him for 6 weeks. I had a lot of fun with him. We talked about like bands that like the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, The Who, Pink Floyd, so on, kind of that era of music. He was really into that. Pollock was a suburb of Glasgow. It had a very nice park, Pollock Park, ton of high flats. If those give me nightmares, just the smell, the stairs, the door, just like going up, just very dangerous and very unnerving place. Elder Fissler talks about it. Elder Lucas talks about him, just like being chased by knives going down those places. Just nuts. We had a place that part of our area was Ibrox and Govan. Ibrox was the home of the Glasgow Rangers. So we avoided that every single night, or they had like a football game. We didn't want to go near that, and just we heard the stories, especially with the Old Firm matches between them and Celtic. Govan was not a very nice place. It was very depressing, and a lot of our appointments were in Govan. Just the Council Flats, you just met a lot of people out there. So one of the coolest things, though, about that area in Pollock was the Binghams. We had some of the greatest senior couples to ever serve with. It was the Binghams. It's kind of small, but Brother Bingham and or Elder Bingham and Sister Bingham, very nice, very quiet, very clean. You had to take off your shoes when you got in their house, like they do in the UK. But anyway, he was the master cleaner. He would keep everything spick and span. He would do the flat inspections, and he'd be like getting the white glove kind of a thing and make sure that we did it right. And he's like, "Oh, others, you didn't do this right." But he had a toupee, and wearing a toupee in Scotland does not bode well for anybody. So it was just funny. Every once in a while, he'd have to like grab his hair from flying off. And we asked him one time to take it off, and I was like, "Okay, put it back," kind of a thing. So we loved them so much. He was so nice. He took my kilt back. He had a sister or a daughter that lived in Awatuki, which is like 35 minutes away, and he took it back for me, and my parents picked it up from that daughter. But you got the I'm forgetting some of these names. Brother Simmons, he passed away. Brother Goddard, and I'm blanking on this other person. So this is another picture of the Binghams. We had our district meetings at their house. Very nice. After the 6 weeks with Elder Webb, I was put with Elder Chad Harrison. He'd be a good person to get on the podcast. I served with him for 6 weeks, and it was his last 6 weeks. That's another question I wanted to ask you. This happened to me too. My last 6 weeks was so I got transferred to Alwa for only 6 weeks. And did that happen a lot? Like the last transfer, it was a 6 week transfer.
No.
I saw it a lot. Anyway, so he's from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I think he's actually a lawyer in Nevada now. So he's done really good for himself.
We've got contact with him. He'll be coming on when he has a little more availability.
Okay. Well, he's a lawyer. So I definitely felt that he was going somewhere in life, and apparently he did. So we talked about hammer time. I didn't really feel it throughout my mission. If I did, it was probably with Elder Harrison. I compare it to like when the Navy SEALs, they go into BUDS training, and then they had that Hell Week. That time with Elder Harrison was fun, but it was hard. He didn't beat me down. He just challenged me a ton. And in the beginning, he gave me a public service announcement. He's like, "I was talking to President Frederick, and I think we're going to make this transfer intense." And I was like, "Okay, I'm going to embrace this." And but I think of anything, I was harder on myself. Because I did not want to let anyone down at home. I didn't want to let President Frederick down. I didn't want Elder Harrison down, and I didn't want to let the Lord down. So it was more of like, okay, how do I manage this and get better to the way that I need to be? So not too long after Chad moved to Pollock, Elder Holland came and visited the mission. I was able to sit in the front row. You guys talking about the splash zone, and he was like kind of right here in front of me, and it was the most intense feeling that I've ever felt. It wasn't like a grilling, but it was more of like, this is an apostle of the Lord that's calling you out to be better. And it was probably one of the most amazing experience I had with an apostle. He gave his speech about salvation is not a cheap experience. And he's like, welcome to the work of Gethsemane. So just a lot of faith building so far until Chad heard that there were bikes. So zone conference ended, and he heard about bikes, excuse me, available in the Paisley zone, and he requested them. And I'm like, are you kidding? You want bikes here? This is the worst place to have bikes. Like in Glasgow, crazy drivers, the potholes, the roundabouts. And so he requested them. Elder Peckham and Elder Frainer were in Irvine, and they drove 20 miles from Irvine on the bikes. And they got to our flat, and they were dead tired. They wanted to sleep, but they had to get on a train back because they didn't have any way to get home, and they're falling asleep.
Wait, they rode bikes from Irvine to Pollock?
Yeah. So they had to go through.
Cow.
Yeah. I don't know what the route was, but they decided to make it an event. Anyway, I think it took the whole preparation day. So they didn't even get groceries. They didn't even do all their stuff they needed to do. So who knows what they did the next day. From the beginning, like I said, it was bad news. One time we were going down a hill. Another reason why not to have bikes. I pulled on the wrong brake and to slow down, and I was not stopping, and I started to flip, and I landed and I crashed. And I because things were so intense, I got right back up, and Elder Harrison's like, stop, let's check you. And I ripped my shirt and everything. He's like, are you okay? Do you have anything broken? And I was like, who are you? You were just intense with me. You just yelled at me like 10 minutes ago, telling me we got to hurry. And I was like taken aback, and kind of felt that like love there, and knew that he wasn't really trying to injure me in any other aspect of being his companion. So at that point I was like, okay, let's take a break. We kept riding. Another time with those bikes, we were in Govan, and I was leading. Things were intense. We had to get somewhere. I saw a group of Neds to my left, and they were kind of coming perpendicular. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to beat them. And I'm thinking Chad's following me really closely. So I'm gone. And I thought he was behind me, and I look back, and I'm probably about 2 football fields away. And he is angry, and he is riding really fast and looking at me. And he's like, why did you not stop? And he tells me what happened. The Neds caught up to him, pulled him off his bike, and was like, where you going? And one of them was going to give him a Glasgow kiss. And he pulls him in close, and Elder Harrison puts his helmet down, and the guy smashes his face on his helmet. He's like, oh, you're right, mate. And he got on his bike and was starting to run right away. And I was like, are you kidding? I did not see that. I thought you were right behind me. I saw them, and I thought you saw them, and I just booked it. I knew this was going to be trouble. And so thankfully he forgave me really quickly about that, and we kind of moved on.
That's quick thinking, though. Like, you got your helmet on.
I know.
I mean,
Wow.
Take one to the face,
right.
take one to the helmet. That was pretty smooth on his part.
So one of the coolest things we got to do on the bikes, though, is they had a lot of trails in the Pollock Park. So that's him on the bike there. We got to go where these Highland Coups are. And then we drove through these trails to get to the district meetings at the Binghams. And it was a lot of fun. Even though I hated the bikes, it was kind of a cool experience. We both bought kilts in Paisley. There's a place called the Houstons in Paisley, and I bought a couple different coats and waistcoats, and I have them in the background, but it's this crazy raccoon sporran. And then the tartan that I have is Bruce, because my family were Bruces in Shetland.
That's cool.
So And I got a love for tartan when I was there, obviously, but I have about $400 worth of tartan. So people collect coins. I collect tartan ties.
Nothing wrong with that.
Nice.
So people that we knew pretty well in the Pollock ward were the McKechnies, Bells, Donalds, Goddards, and then Brother Simmons, and then Alan Cumming. Alan Cumming was like the first stake president in Glasgow. And then I for some reason, he was in the Paisley stake after that. Interesting thing about the Bells, I think it's funny, ironic. Brother Bell married someone, and her name was Isabella. And so when she married him, she took his name, and it became a question, Isabella Bell. And so I always thought that was funny. Anyway, pretty dumb dad joke. So after that, I was called to train in Brodie Ferry, so whitewash train. So Elder Harrison was leaving. He went home, and I was like, "Wow, this is bizarre. I haven't heard about this, but I'm going to open a new, not open. I'm going to whitewash this area and train as well." And Elder Harrison was like, "Okay, I was really intense with you, and I don't want you to be that intense with this missionary." So anyway, I tried to use that advice as much as I could, but things kind of went downhill after starting with Elder Johnson. This was Wesley Johnson. He was from Charlotte, North Carolina. Very, very green. There was a different, like I said, different level of intensity. Some of the other missionaries talked about it. You had to be a little bit more strict, help them understand the mission, get to know what to do, fill out the area book, be very obedient, make sure you're doing everything right so that you're not missing anything, because we were going to be blessed. If we did everything that our leaders told us to do, and everything from the White Handbook and going out from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m., you'll be blessed. So I wish every time you trained, you had a dossier about each person that you trained, just to know about them, what their capabilities are, what their habits are, what like, anyway, I wish we had that. It wasn't available. But so working with Elder Johnson kind of threw me for a loop, because I wanted to do well. I wanted to be a strong missionary and to show that I could keep up with everyone else. He was very nice. Members loved him so much. He had a lot to offer, and I don't think he realized it. So Brodie Ferry was probably one of my favorite areas, if not my favorite area to serve in. I was there the second longest. I was there for 6 months. I was going from Glasgow to this really posh area in just outside of Dundee, to very vanilla Brodie Ferry, no craziness. It was a huge, stark change. We lived one street from the Esplanade, so that's the street that abuts the beach. We were one street over on Castle Street. And
Nice.
Brodie Castle this castle right here was just down the street, walking distance. It was free. We went up there all the time. Awesome. One of the interesting points about this is it's one of the last fortifications to be used in war, I think. It protected the Firth of Tay, that opening. They called them Firths in Scotland, for U-boats and other aircraft. They have like anti-aircraft memorabilia there. And then I received a letter from my grandmother mentioning one time that growing up, she and her family would go on holiday to Brodie Beach. Dundee is probably the sunniest place in Scotland. I don't know why, just the weather gets vectored differently. And so people would go on holiday down to Brodie Beach. And she showed me pictures. Let's see. Well, whitewash training, I learned a lot about developing an area. I knew that we had such a huge opportunity to see miracles, and there was a lot of expectation. I was trying to tell Elder Johnson, like, hey, we've been in here for 2 weeks. Let's start kind of getting our nose to the grindstone. Let's showing our what our efforts doing. We had a lot of strikeouts until one day I was like, okay, one of the tactics we use is to go into the area book and look at our old contacts. The record keeping was important. Even though in that record keeping it wasn't great, we found this diamond in the rough, and his name was Rusty and Vera, or their name was Rusty and Vera. They were from Zimbabwe as refugees. I don't know if you know about the whole dynamic there. The Zimbabweans, whatever they call them, they were persecuting whites, and so a lot of people had to flee, and they were refugees to the UK. And so we called them and asked if we could come and teach them about the gospel of Jesus Christ. They agreed. And in that meeting, I said, let's set a date. They lived in Carnoustie, a really cool place, really cool golf course, a lot of good scenery. And some of my most cathartic moments were walking down that Esplanade in Carnoustie. Rusty and Vera, along with their daughter, were being taught, but Vera was another challenge. She was deaf, and I don't think she knew anything about like British Sign Language, nor did I. I took sign language in high school for only one reason, and that was the girl to guy ratio was like 1:8. So I was like, my intention of learning sign language was not in the right place. So, but thankfully she could lip read. But it wasn't very good because the way that Americans enunciate is different from the way people speak in the UK and in South Africa or Zimbabwe. So we would teach lessons using notepads and videos and pictures. On our first lesson, I had Wesley invite them, and then we set a date for 3 weeks later. Unfortunately, Rusty and Vera didn't make that date, so we had to push the baptism. And while all this was going on, we started teaching this other lady named Donna. She was a heavy alcoholic. We always had another priesthood holder with us at that appointment, except for this one time. We had an appointment with Donna, and we couldn't get a priesthood holder to come with us. Donna also lived in Carnoustie. We arrived at Donna's house and knocked on the door, and I did not have a good feeling. And you could just feel this presence there, and it was awful. Donna came to the door. She was wearing a loose robe and smelled like alcohol. And she said, "Come in, elders," kind of very nonchalantly. And I walked toward the living room, or saw it, and because the door is like in her living room, and I was like, let's not. We're going to stay right here. Donna noticed that we weren't following, and she made another attempt to say, "Hey, come on." And I was like, "No, we're going to stay right here." She looked at Wesley with this dead stare and with this low, creepy voice, and she said, "Wesley, come in." And she did this 3 times, and Elder Johnson was freaked out. He was like shaking, like didn't know what to do. I told Donna could do another lesson another time. She's like, "No," like, and then I was like, "Okay, well, let's do this at this doorstep." She reluctantly sat down at the eaves of her door, and we shared her message. I probably just read a couple scriptures. She got tired of sitting and stood up too quickly, and then she was still like losing her balance because she wasn't sober, and fell backwards, and her robe opened up. And we were like so shocked. And Elder Johnson froze, and I was like, I grabbed him and we left. I was like, "Don, I'm sorry, we got to go. We might not be back for a while."
Oh my gosh.
So that next week, we were on exchanges with the zone leaders, and Elder Johnson stayed in our area, and I went to the zone in Dundee where this, I think it was Elder Van Leuven was. So I went back with him. Anyway, He caught up with them. He was on the bus with other Dimmer John Ashton, and they're in Carnoustie, and all of a sudden, here comes Donna, and she's walking towards him, and he's trying to like duck down, and she turns and taps to him on the shoulder, and she's like, "Hey, Elder Johnson, how are you?" And he's like, like I don't know what to say, and she's like, "I'm sorry about what happened. Can I come to church, or can I still come to church?" And he's like, "Yes."
Goodness.
So just kind of like funny.
Wow.
Don't have too many experiences like that, or maybe you do. So
thankfully, no.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Let's see. Another miracle that happened was that we were going to see all these less actives, and one of them was kind of down the street in Brodie Ferry. Her name was Sister Ogilvie. When Wesley and I got to the door, we were shocked. We knocked on the door, and she was shocked to see us. And she had been saying, "I've been praying for someone to come to or call me." She didn't have anyone's number from the ward or our number. She then tells us about her sister that was in the hospital that had a collapsed lung, and was in like dire straits to survive. I want to say that her sister was dealing with like a drug habit and overdosed. And then for some reason, like she was luckily taken to the hospital. Well, Sister Ogilvie asked if we could go give her a blessing. Before we said we could go, I called the zone leaders because it was out of our area, and I said, "Hey, can we go give this sister a blessing?" And they're like, "Yeah, go ahead." And anyway, we get in her car, we drive to the hospital, and I want to say that probably one of the first times that Wesley had ever given a blessing. So I told him that he would anoint and I would seal the anointing. I had him consult the white book as we were driving. And then we finally got to that sister's room. We found her with this plastic bubble around her head to kind of keep that pressure in her lungs. Thankfully, this bubble had like this porthole that we could at least get a hand and touch her head. So I had Elder Johnson put a dab of oil on his finger and put it on her head and anoint her. And then I couldn't have him. I couldn't go in there myself. I had to wait for him to be done, and he couldn't go in with me. So she's like looking at us like, "What is going on?" I told her beforehand what we were doing, and then I placed my hand on her head and gave her a blessing. And then I said, like, bless her that God knew her, loved her, and that I pronounced the blessing that she could be able to make a full recovery upon her faith in Jesus Christ. And then we left. We had a weekly meeting with Sister Ogilvie after that. She later mentioned that her sister was fully recovered within days from a collapsed lung. So just pretty amazing.
Wow.
Just weird situation. Never had a blessing like that any like that after that. So
wow, it's a miracle.
So what I didn't know what was happening though with why Elder Johnson was going on exchanges with the zone leaders. It was at like a interview with President Frederick, and he pulled me into his office or where we were at and told me that he was struggling. Wesley was struggling and wanted to go home. And there were times that he was calling President after I'd gone to bed. And I was probably so stunned by this revelation that when it hit me, I felt it was worse than that Ned that hit me in the face. Firstly, because I didn't know how to comprehend what was going on, if it was something that I had done, or secondly, like Zach Clark, he said in his podcast, he wanted to be a missionary so bad, and I wanted to be a missionary so bad that I couldn't understand why someone would want to lead this people, the beauty, the hard work, the Lord's love, the mantle of a missionary, and my heritage, and so on. After this, I tried harder to help Wesley without him catching on that I knew he wanted to go home. and this was kind of per President Frederick's request. And I wanted him to stay so bad because I knew there was more to that mission. But later on, I thought things were going well. So at Wesley's first zone conference, we got a call from Bishop Ian Snee. I don't know if you know him, but he by the way, the Snee family and the Sweeney family were so loving and hilarious. So Ian Snee and his son Craig married Dominique Sweeney. Dominique Sweeney had a brother that was serving his mission in Arizona at the time as well. So when I got home, I got to meet up with him, have lunch. Anyway,
that's awesome.
So Bishop Snee calls us and says he met with Rusty right here and his wife Vera and their daughter, and she didn't get baptized because I don't think she was 8 yet. But Bishop Snee says, "Hey, I talked to them, and I think they're ready to be baptized, and they're going to be baptized this Saturday." And Wesley was so excited, and we were like praying for this miracle for Wesley to stay. We let him baptize Rusty, and I can't remember if it was Rusty or Vera. We had hoped that this would encourage Wesley to stay, but unfortunately, he still wanted to go home. So another person we started teaching was Dominique Snee's brother-in-law, James. I don't think we were the first missionaries to teach him. We started off really well, but there were times that he would be aloof and we couldn't figure out why. I confronted him about it. He admitted to us that every time we came over, there was a football match and he couldn't focus on the lesson. I guess football is life.
It's religion.
Right. And he's from Nigeria. So like he was really cool. He would draw all these pictures. I think I have some of his drawings. But we tried so hard. I wanted to make it happen for him, mainly because of the connection that I was making with the Snees and the Sweeneys. But we would take him and play football and volleyball, and we became good friends. But fortunately, he became baptized later on, a few transfers after that, with another Arizonan. I can't remember his name, but he baptized him. Nice. We had another moves call, and I was being told that I would be adding another missionary. And so in my mind, there was that indication that Wesley was going home. So, but President said, you're going to be serving with someone you've already served with. And I was like, that's weird. So it was Alex O'Donohue. We became companions again. And so let's see, where did I leave off? I was so pumped. And then President says, "Oh, we're calling you to be a district leader as well over the Perth missionaries and the Montrose senior couple." It was Elder and Sister Manwaring. They're so nice. Like I said, we had some of the greatest senior couples. Maybe 3 days after that, after Alex came in the companionship, Wesley called President and said, "Hey, I'm going home." And we tried hard, but he went home after 6 weeks, which was kind of a bummer because we had the tattoo right after he left. So
oh, man.
The President Frederick was like, "No, you're not going to the tattoo." So for anyone that doesn't know what the tattoo is, it's not really a tattoo like anything like, but what tattoo really is like tapping. When like the old days, they would tap a razor blade with ink on it. So the tapping is like a drum. So the Edinburgh military tattoo, they have this event where they build stanchions on the esplanade of the castle. And that was our kind of cultural event that we would go to, and they'd have pipe bands. They have other bands that would come from different parts of the world, dancers. And the best moment is when they drop the gate or lift the gate and the pipers come out and they make their first entrance. And they have projections on the castle. The second time that we went, it was like 200 years since Robert Burns had passed away or something like that. They were doing an anniversary, so it was really cool.
That's cool.
So we wanted to go to it on our trip, but COVID was still having an issue and they canceled it. We had already bought tickets and they actually had to refund us. I'm wearing this drum major's outfit. Brother David Harkness was a drum major for the RAF Lucas pipe band, and he let me put it on. He had done the tattoo several times, and he went to Basel, Switzerland to go and do the tattoos there. One of the coolest things about that day is that it's an all-day event because they let us go down on the Fringe Festival on the Royal Mile, just kind of see everything. I learned a lot about the missionaries, like Elder Patel doing Warhammer. I don't think he talked about that, but he was telling us all about it. We went to this store that had Warhammer everywhere. Anyway, so, the show really doesn't start until like 9:30 at night. So, and we would get done about 10:30, 11 o'clock. And this would be like day one of preparation day. And then the next day we had day two of preparation day and we could sleep in. And we'd all play football and go get our messages, which were groceries, so on and so on. But the Fringe Festival is cool because you got a lot of people watching, all the crazy performers. Anyway, so Brodie Ferry, it's part of the Bingham Ward. There are probably 3 sets of elders, 1 set of sisters. We would take this one elder or one 16-year-old priest out on joint teaches. And this is the story about Elder Bauckham and Elder Fissler as zone leaders. Well, this particular day, we worked it out with the zone leaders that we could take this priest with us on joint teaches. And they would drive him to our area to go on the joint teach for our appointment after they had taken him out. Zone leaders at the time were Chad Bauckham, Matt Fissler. I'm reading. I'm sorry.
You're
I don't
good.
know by rote. Anyway, so Chad drove, as was spoken in his podcast. He drove a lot. Matt let the priest sit in shotgun on the way out to our area. And we finally meet up with them. The priest gets out and Matt goes and sits in the front passenger seat. Everything was dandy until I got a phone call. I looked at the phone and it was the Dundee zone leaders. And I was like, oh, what's going on? So I answered and Matt says, hey, I think, I'm not going to say his name, but the priest peed his pants and it's all over the front seat. He then asked me to discreetly check to see if the priest's pants were wet. And so I did. And lo and behold, his leg was so damp and he was shaking the pee off of his shoe. And and I told Matt that he was, and Matt, he's like, oh man, are you serious? Well, Chad was dying in laughter in the car and I could hear him on the phone. I was like, oh my gosh, this really happened. And so I don't know what to do. I think we took him with us while his like pants are drying as we're walking. And I was like, how's this going to go when he's sitting on this person's seat? I really hope that our lesson like backed out so that he didn't have to sit down on their couch or something like that. Anyway, so I think about that all the time. So
things you never thought you'd experience.
Right.
Prepares you for kids.
Right. So, as a district leader, this is my district. I'm blanking on this elder's name, but this is Elder Humphreys, whom you've talked about in the past, the man-wearings, and Elder Bauckham and Elder Fissler. This is the Slickham Bridge in St. Andrews. So at this time, it was about November of 2008. We had Moose call, and I was like, okay, well, I've been in Brodie Ferry for about 4.5 months, and I thought I was going to be moving, but that wasn't the case. Alex moved, and I can't remember where he went, but I was told that I'd be training again. I was so shocked because of how things went with my first greenie. And I just felt so loved and thought that I could have another chance to train. And Elder Lewis, he's a good missionary, a good person. He didn't really talk much about my time serving with him. I'll talk a little bit about him, but I trained Elder Christopher Lewis from Bristol, England. When Chris came on the podcast, I felt so proud of him. I was glad to hear all the good things that were happening to him. So he was one of those elders that you could easily be jealous of. He was he was attractive. He was well spoken. He very attention grabbing. He was very posh. Many of the members loved him. So I kind of was a little jealous of him, but I'm grateful that we were companions. So I didn't want to blow it with him because of what happened in the past. Chris mentioned that I really wanted to do well. And there was this bit of anxiety of training and being a district leader to perform well. So I wanted to make sure that he knew what it meant to be a Scotland Edinburgh Mission missionary. And so I may have been a little hard, but I wanted to make sure that he was doing well. Chris talked about his relationship with the British Sign Language. He got to use it a lot in our area, and I wish he had talked more about that, but it came in pretty handy. We had several lessons that were in British Sign Language. So I was still probably like, I had a lot of fun with him. We had pulled pranks on each other. One of the ones that I pulled on him was that later on in the year, we had some snow, and we had a flat that was 2 levels. And on that second level, we had a window and there was a ledge and snow would pile up. In our bedroom, we had a mirror, and Chris liked to go downstairs with just a towel, and then he would come back upstairs with a towel. And so I grabbed a few snowballs and put them on the ledge, and the window was open. And he comes back upstairs after his shower, just a little bit damp. And he's like, "Why is the window open?" And I guess I said because I was hot and I needed to cool off. And then asked if I could. Then he asked if I could close the window. In my head, I was like, "No problem." I waited till his back was turned. I grabbed a snowball and turned and pelted him in the back. And he was like, "Oh!" Like, anyway, I quickly ran downstairs laughing. And that day, he tried to get me back by cracking the door open a little bit, and he put like this glass or a cup with water, and he's like, "Elder Slade, I forgot my pen upstairs. Can you get it?" I was like, "Okay, like, why can't you get it?" And so I go upstairs and I saw the door open, and I was like thinking, okay, well, he's going to try to get me back. So I push it open, and he heard the water fall, and he started laughing, and I knew it was a prank. And so I saw the water fall, and the water got all over the floor. I was like, "Hey, you got the water wet." And so anyway, he tried to get me back, but it didn't happen. So anyway, I loved Elder Lewis. He was a good missionary. Grateful for his service, and he taught me a lot. This is the zone of the district. Elder Hemer, Elder Bacham, Elder Patel. These are the Sweeneys. Oh, sorry, Sweeney, Dominic Snee. I'm blanking on her name. That's Dominic's sister. And then just a lot of cool members like the Mays. And so the Grants, the Fifes were so great. They were in a picture earlier on. Let's see if I can find them. This is Cyril Fife and his wife, Sister Fife. She made the best meals. I didn't have Brussels sprouts a lot, but when we went to her house, it tasted like butter. Like, it was amazing. Like, she would keep the plates warm in the oven until we got there and pulled them out. The plates were like hot, and so it'd keep our food warm. We had haggis maybe with them. We never had mince and tatties. that was kind of a normal meal. She would take it up a notch and have like 5 courses. So we'd have soup and bread, then a main course, then we'd have like not a second course, but like just crazy amounts of food, and then we'd have a dessert. So
wow.
And then we had Brother Douglas. We went to his house once and had clootie dumpling. I don't know if you've ever had that. Just a really cool dessert. It's like a pudding that they put a coin in there, and if you got that piece of coin, you were like, I guess you had good luck that year, something like that. It was a pretty cool tradition. We had the Harknesses, the Hands, and the Days. Very great ward to be a part of. Let's see. After 6 months, I was called to go and open an area. It was Greenock. I don't know if it was open during the time that you guys were there. For a time, it was closed, and not a lot was happening. It was a branch of maybe like 5 families. And I started this with Elder Webb from Colorado. This was Tyler's last. So his first name is Tyler. It was his last 6 weeks. I was a little sad to leave Bloody Ferry and the Dundee Bingham Ward right before Christmas. I felt like the missionaries were treated exceptionally well during Christmas, like presents and getting to go see movies at their houses. Left one of the most active wards in the mission to go to a branch, like I said, with 5 families. Chad Bauckham, he was my zone leader at the time. I had a conversation with him before I went, that he told me that he was a little jealous that I was going out there because of like the potential. And I've talked to him about that in the past, but it's such a dynamic area. It's pretty large, that covered Port Glasgow, Greenock, Gurrick, Dunoon, Largs, and the Isle of Bute. Our area, if I could pull up the Google Maps, here's Greenock, here's Dunoon, Isle of Bute. So you had to take a ferry to get to Dunoon, and you had to take a ferry from Weems Bay to get to Isle of Bute. We had a couple members that lived here. Our branch president lived in Dunoon, and we had to go over there once or twice a week. And then Largs is down here, so that there was a bus that would go all the way. We didn't have too many members in Largs, and we had Millport, but there weren't anyone on that island. Anyway, we didn't have a flat, and we had to stay with the zone leaders in Irvine. That's about an hour and a half train ride every day from Irvine to Greenock. So we'd have to go to Paisley, and then we have to go from Paisley to Greenock. And our zone leaders at the time were Elder Sean Waite and Elder Chris Lee. Not my favorite time to be in a flat with 2 other missionaries, because we were constantly in each other's business, not very conducive for either companionship, too much ego on one roof. So it's just crazy. So, and then I think Tyler was pretty excited for the prospect of going home, and so it was getting tough. Anyway, after 2 weeks of doing that, of commuting from Irvine to Greenock, we finally got a flat in a really posh area of Greenock. It was right in front of a lawn bowls pitch. We would watch them on Saturdays during our morning study. Just a bunch of old people rolling these balls. And I was like, maybe one day I'll take that up as a geriatric or something like that. Since we were there for Christmas, we watched a couple movies, including like Jimmy Stewart double feature, like It's a Wonderful Life and Mr. Kruger's Christmas. They had a little TV with a VCR embedded in the TV that we could watch those 2 movies at the church building. President Kane, he was our branch president. And we were like, hey, we wanted to watch this movie with you. And Tyler and I's pick was The Dark Knight. It had just come out that summer. And it was the sequel to Batman Begins. Great movie. I can't remember if it was during the movie or after the movie. President Kane, he's kind of an older gentleman, and his wife was a staunch. She grew up Church of Scotland, very staunch, like very nose to the grindstone kind of a person. Well, they're watching it with us, and they're like, I don't know if this is a wise choice for the to watch with us or with the missionaries, and so like just really funny experience with them. Very intense movie. Like, why so serious? Anyway.
You took the words right out of my mind.
Right. So we served together for 6 weeks, and then he went home, and then Jeffrey Scott became my companion. But I wanted to point out this picture right here. I showed it to you earlier. This is that Lyle Hill. I like to show people what I looked like beforehand. And I want to say my camera is horrible. I bought this like Kodak camera that had a big screen, terrible lens. Like it was so bad. Everything was fuzzy. Everyone had clear a shot, and mine was always like blurry. Maybe it was just me. I was moving a lot or something. So this was my favorite view of Greenock. Other Jeffrey Scott, he was my companion the longest. I was with him for 6 months, and he was from West Jordan, Utah. I bumped into him in Brigham City. I used to live in Utah, like in Clinton and Eagle Mountain. And then when we were up there, we bumped into him at that Pioneer Day celebration. It was great to see him. Jeffrey Scott is a man of a few words. I don't think I had one argument with him. He was great to serve with. And then he'd always do this thing when we get on a bus or a train. He was prone to fall asleep. Any train or ferry or whatever. And I've got several pictures of him falling asleep. I don't know if I have a picture of him. There he is right there. So, he would always fall asleep. So we had an appointment, and we were up in Port Glasgow. The bus was kind of driving uphill, and came to our stop, and I pushed the button, and I nudged him, I think, and I said, here's our stop. And well, I got up and thought he was following me. I guess I have a problem with going in the lead, thinking that my companions are behind me. Anyway, I turned to say something after I got off the bus, and I noticed that he's not there. And I'm like panicking, where is he? And I see him as the bus is driving away, and I'm like pounding, like, wake up. And he doesn't wake up. It doesn't work. The bus is going. And I'm like thinking, where is this bus going? I have no idea. It could be going all the way to Largs, which is on the opposite end of our area. And it's a pretty big area. So I was running after the bus in church shoes on wet, like sidewalk, slipping and all that kind of stuff. Thankfully, I see the bus turn. And so I make a beeline towards that bus, and he gets off, and I'm like, what were you thinking? Why did you not get off the bus? You're never going to fall asleep on the bus again. That never happened. He always fell asleep, and I just kind of made sure that I bumped him hard enough. And I was just glad that he got off the bus, because I had the phone. And like, I don't know what he would have done when he found out that he wasn't at the right spot that he should have been.
Man.
Shortly after Elder Scott became my companion, I was called to be in the branch presidency as a counselor with President Kane. And this is our presidency right here. President Kane, Stephen Cox, and then myself. He was the first counselor. I was the second counselor. And then I think Elder Scott was the executive secretary. I can't remember. But that was such an amazing experience. I took it for granted in the beginning. And I was thinking very selfishly, I'm going to be here for a really long time. And it was so hard to be a missionary and in a branch presidency, because there was a lot of work that needed to be done in Greenock, and you could feel that pressure from the zone leaders, the district leaders, and then you had this pressure of being in the branch presidency of like this really small branch. At one point, this branch was a ward of maybe 100 people, because there was in the Holy Loch, there was a naval base, U.S. naval base. There were a lot of people that would come, and that's why that branch was formed, to help and support the people that were over there. And so there was a lot of work, especially when we opened the area, and it was multi-rolled. I felt, like I said, caught in two worlds. But I saw so many miracles in Greenock. One of the miracles was Brian and Maggie Heron. And I showed you earlier a picture of them. But Jeffrey and I were building our teaching pool, and all we knew the best way was to work with the members. We needed to build the pool of members as well, given the fact that we were in the branch presidency. So we were looking at the branch roster for lesser active members, and then we got to this point where we were like, okay, let's go see the Herons. I remember many of President Frederick's lessons about being direct, get rid of generalities. Like a generality be, the reason why I'm here is, get straight to the point. I was pretty direct with the Herons. I said that there were very few people attending the Greenock branch, and the Lord loved them, and he needs them at church. And I invited them to attend the next Sunday. They came to church, and within a couple more weeks of attendance, Brian was called to be the high priest group leader, and Maggie was called to be the Relief Society president. And ever since then, they have done so much. I was just so glad that they kind of realized that the reason why the branch had been dwindling is maybe it was because of them. And not to put any shame or anything like that on anyone, they just kind of took it personal. And it was kind of at this point where I was like, okay, I need to make every single moment personal like that. Like, it's only me and my companion. We are serving in this area. There's no one else in this world of 7 billion people that is doing this work for this area. I am the only person with my companion, or I am the only person standing between Satan and these people. And I take that as my motivation at any calling or effort, and serving in my family and all that. So anyway, I was so grateful for the Herons to take up that charge to go back to church. It was at that time that we started doing monthly branch activities. So we had Burn Supper, we had a Western night, we had maybe a disco, and then they kept just coming. Brian would come and play his guitar, and even I want to say he brought a band. We got a lot of people out, and that opened the door to more activity in the branch, and our teaching pools got so much bigger. When I was on social media, I'm not on social media anymore for reasons anyway, but I could see that the branch was still going really strong. And when I visited, the branch was probably about 35, 40 people strong now, 15 years later. So
that's incredible.
So we began teaching this girl. So that was a picture of the branch activity, and there's one of them. So a lot of people were coming. I'm going to talk about Ann Curry in a little bit, but that's one of the activities that she was able to attend. Let's see. This is Isle of Butte. When we got to go visit out there, there was a family that we were teaching to try and get sealed in the temple. This is the Cox family. She was part Filipino, and I think at the time her son, when we visited last, her son was preparing to go on our mission. Wow. So I need to follow up and make sure that he was able to go. So Sister Rooney, I'm going to talk about her in a little bit, but we started teaching this girl. Her name was Zoe McDermott, and she was the niece of Brian Heron, and she was another person that probably struggled intellectually. at 9 years old. She couldn't really read, so we had to kind of change the way that we taught. And it was such an amazing opportunity to practice doing something completely different than what you're used to. And it got me out of my comfort zone. And that was our only baptism in 7.5 months in Greenock, but the ward was flourishing. Let's go back here. Our branch president, like I said, he lived in Dunoon. He relied on Stephen and I and Jeffrey to go visit the members of the branch. We started visiting and giving the sacrament to Ann Curry, that was homebound due to health reasons. So like this is one moment where she was able to get out of the house. She was a small yet very faithful sister. I would receive letters from her sister in America saying how much Ann loved having us over. I guess for some reason there were people that the ward hadn't visited her in a long time. She was very lonely and needed someone to bring light into her life. That same sister that found me on Facebook and thanked me again and said that she had passed away, but she was so grateful for what we had done to help her interact with her, to help her receive that ordinance each Sunday. One of the greatest miracles in Greenock branch was Sister Rooney. This is her. She makes me laugh. She was so kind, and you just could feel how much she loved the gospel and wanted to share it with others. Greenock was pretty hilly. Sister Rooney would hike those hills as if she was half of her age. And she would share her testimony to pretty much anyone. We started teaching her niece's family. They were really fun to teach, and the husband would show up early mornings to those lessons. We had early morning lessons to hope that her husband wasn't drunk, but he would be already steaming, and he would say the craziest things. Anytime is a good time to drink in Scotland, right? I was praying and working really hard to teach that family. I felt like Sister Rooney's niece truly felt the gospel, the Holy Ghost, but lacked the commitment to proceed to baptism. Sister Rooney would have loved to have family at church, but she worked so hard. And I met her. She again when we went and visited that branch, and she just brought so many good memories when I visited that branch. It was such an amazing experience. So, like I said, I tell everyone that Greenock was one of my toughest areas because of how much we were putting into finding, teaching, reaching out to active members and less active members. I felt so beat up at night. This was a turning point for me, though. One Sunday, it was a branch conference, and President Yates, I don't know if you met him when he was a stake president.
Yep.
And him and other stake auxiliary presidencies came to visit. Side note, to kind of help your listeners that aren't used to what the church is like in Scotland, many of the wards and branches in Scotland have sacrament meetings last. So President Yates during sacrament meeting handed me a note that said something like this: look at how many are, man, I'm a blubbering idiot. Look at how many are in attendance today. Thank you for yours and other Scots' hard work. And that Sunday, we had maybe 25 to 30 in attendance outside of the President Yates and the auxiliaries. They looked at me so much. At that point, I knew that I could overcome all my challenges, and I knew that I was always doing it with the Savior's help. Later on, I kind of had some bouts of unemployment, and with the infertility issues, I really gleaned on this experience in Greenock to help me to overcome and stay strong and endure. So I was there for 7.5 months, and it was a great experience. At the latter end of serving in Greenock, we received permission to go on a road trip. I think it's this picture. We were able to go on a road trip with the branch president, and we went to the Argyll area portion of the Highlands, which is the southwestern portion. they took us to Inverary and went to an infamous jail there. So it was really cool. I think they have this on a lot of like TV shows. Excuse me. But my member shout out for this is the Canes, Stephen and Loriana Cox, the Thompsons, Brian and Maggie Heron, the Bowies, Sarah Rudy, Ann Curry, and Sister Murray. I worked with them so much. So after Greenock, let's see, I went to Kirkcaldy, and it's a very strong ward and really fun place to serve. This area covered a lot of the southwestern portion of Fife. That included towns like Glenrothes, Leven, East Weems, Dysart, Burnt Island, and so on. My companion was Elder Stephen Stepp from West Jordan, Utah. He was full of surprises. I didn't realize how much he liked to sing until he belted out the theme song to Phineas and Ferb. I was taken aback. I had never heard anything like this because it came out when I was on my mission. And then he would make scriptures into songs to help him memorize. And it didn't matter where he was at. He would be singing it out loud on the bus and our train and the flat. So it was crazy. So early on in the mission, I had a dream that I would serve with Elder Sam Little. But at that point, he had already completed his mission when I got to Kirkcaldy. That being said, he dated and married Shona Letkin in Kirkcaldy. This is Shona right here. And let's see. And they started dating, and then they got married, and we were present for the wedding. Well, either before or after the wedding, he was called to be the ward mission leader. So I guess my dream came to fruition, and I told him about it, and it kind of like gelled. We gelled a little bit, and he was a funny person to be around. Stephen was a really new missionary. I think he had been out maybe one transfer or two transfers. And I had to take a different approach with him that I did with my other greenies. So I gave him a lot of control of the area. I gave him empowerment to go and give him the ability to speak his mind, let him be heard. I think he needed that so much because it was easy to get bulldozed because there was a lot of like very strong A-type personalities in the mission. And so for someone like him, he's a special person to me. And I feel like he needed a lot of growing, and this allowed him to grow. One day we probably on our way to an appointment in one of our harsher areas in Kirkcaldy, as we're walking down this neighborhood, we saw a group of people carrying on outside. Well, this blonde lady stammered her way over to us. We knew she was drunk because the smell was so powerful. She starts to tell us, I'm going to do my best Scottish accent. I know yous. I want to be baptized. Will you baptize me? Kind of like all drunk. And I'm like, sure. So I gave her a pass along card with our number, knowing that she probably wouldn't call. Because it was kind of a weird situation. We had this group of people around, and like, anyway, we didn't hear from her for maybe about a week later until we were back in that area. She saw us on the street again and came running to us. She was a completely different person. She told us her name was Lizzie Suter and that she wanted to still be baptized and that she needed to make a change in her life because she had a son and that she was seeing what her choices, how it was affecting her and her family. We set up a time and started her plan to quit smoking and drinking. We set up the baptism, or invited her to baptism, but she couldn't help the type of things that she was nurtured with. So it kind of like very hard to help her overcome some of her challenges. But so she and her son, John, were later baptized. But crazy story with her. That's Lizzie, and that's Josh.
Wow.
So for Lizzie's baptism, she asked me to baptize her, but there are just some things that you don't think about as a missionary trying to tell a girl to be ready for baptism, like the formalities. Well, the ceremony went great. She got in the font, and everything went good. But as I led the leader to the edge to go upstairs, I noticed something wasn't quite right, and with what I was seeing. As Lizzie started to head up the stairs of the font, I completely forgot about what happens to white clothes when it's wet. So,
oops.
She was about halfway up the stairs, and in plain view to the viewers of the baptism, you can clearly see that she was wearing a black bra and thong. I was so shocked. I probably said, "Oh crap," out loud. Just right after a baptism. And so I quickly ran up behind her to block the view. And I think those that were, also, I think those were her only underwear. So she had to wear her wet underwear underneath her dry clothes. And she was telling us about it and like, just kind of like squishing it. Anyway, I was, ever since that, I would always remember to tell everyone to wear something that will not be see-through or whatever.
And bring a change.
Yeah, bring extra. So some things that you don't necessarily want to see as a young missionary. So, and about that time, President Frederick was finishing his mission, and then we would receive President Griffiths as our new mission president. President Frederick, there's not, you could say so much about, he could probably write a book about his life. And I think he is, not like just his life, but his family, his history. And if he put his stuff, I could probably read that all day. So anyway, President Griffiths was great. I didn't have a lot of time with him. And there are a few of the things that he carried over from President Frederick, like the agency, trying to make sure that we were all agents of our own selves. And then Sister Griffiths kind of took up that same mantle of trying to make sure that we were healthy. I don't know if this was a big thing from Sister Frederick, but she made us always made sure that we were taking vitamins like garlic and vitamin D. There was a lot of like seasonal affectiveness disorder or something like that.
Depression.
Yeah.
Sad.
So she was telling us we need to take that. And those that weren't taking it, you could see that they were having a rough time of it. So she wasn't crazy.
I wish Sister Vreens would have told us that. That would have been very helpful for me. I know
that. See, I'm from Arizona and I love the rain. And I guess when you're deprived of it, you really enjoy it. And so, and I was really prepared for Scotland. I knew that brollies and umbrellas were not going to work. So you need to find a good coat.
And a solid flat cap.
Yeah. So I guess I forgot a story, but now that we're talking about coats, remember how I talked about Juan Zapata? He bought all my clothes. Well, he bought the jacket for me at this place called Pomeroy's. It's like the Missionary Mall or Mr. Mac or something like that in Arizona. Mm-hmm. Well, it didn't fit me all that well. It was a little big, and I didn't like it. And so I bought myself a new coat. And it was that pea coat, that very nice tweed. And Elder O'Donoghue, I love him so much that I wanted him to make sure that he had a good coat. And his coat was so tattered, so I gave him mine. And every time I saw him, I was so glad to see that he was wearing my coat. And because he was always cold, always wet. He had holes in his jacket. And so he was a good person. I really hope that things are going well for him. So back to Kirkcaldy. there was this dynamic, and I hated it, between the bishop and the missionaries. There were a lot of animosity sometimes when you go to a new area and you hear about these stories of like, oh, the bishop doesn't really like us. And anyway, there was this moment with Bishop Scharf. He was really struggling with missionaries not bringing in a lot of quality members, and both ideologies were having bad attitudes about missionary work. So, and I don't think he had missionaries at his house for a really long time. So I just remember serving in the branch, like how hard it is to be caught in that world, the two worlds. And I just remember in a ward council meeting, I piped up and I was like, Bishop, I know that you're working really hard. We're working really hard. What key indicators can I help you with? What can we do to contribute to the ward that would bless the ward? I think that softened his heart. And he later would let us come into his home. And we started, he fed us dinner. His wife made the best like lamb crown. And that's like a really fancy meal. Had the mint sauce and everything like that. It was like Easter. I can't remember, but just amazing dinner. But I saw this division kind of lifting between the members of the ward and the missionary work. I wasn't there very long, 3 months. But it broke my heart to see like missionaries say things like, oh, I'm not afraid to offend anyone in the ward, or I'm not here to make friends. Sure, we're doing this work, but we are doing this together. I hated that so much. So anyway, to kind of lighten the mood, I've got this really funny story, but we volunteered over at the Luckins to go trim their bushes. After all the work was completed, they don't have trucks, right? So you have to open the hatchback and put it all in the boot, the trimmings. So we put all the trimmings in the boot, closed the hatchback. We kind of stepped away for a little bit, and then we were like, okay, we got to take this to the dump. Anyway, so we get back into the car, and all of a sudden we notice barely after we start driving, there's something moving in the car. Like little bits, like little insects crawling in the car. They weren't insects. They were spiders. It was something out of like an arachnid apocalypse.
Oh, no.
There were like 30 spiders crawling in their car. We didn't make it to the dump. I think we just found like a park and just pulled everything out and tried to shake ourselves off and just try to find any type of spider and squash it. And it was nuts.
Oh my goodness.
They were in our hair. They were in, what's her name? Shona Little's hair. And it's just the ickiness that it feels like crawling up your neck and in your shirt. It's just crazy.
Goodness.
Anyway, so traveling through Fife is a bit different from other places in Scotland. There's a lot of picturesque places in Scotland, like hills and water. Well, in Fife, there's a lot of like barley fields, and sitting on like double-decker buses on the top, you could watch the barley when it's getting close to harvest them for the whiskey. You could see the wind as it like blows. It looks like waves, and it's really fun to ride on the double-decker bus there, because it's like this rolling hills. And something that I don't know if anyone's talked about this, but every single town, and I'm not used to this because I didn't ever live in the UK before, but every town has a war memorial. And there's a lot of little towns as you go into Fife, and you could see each individual war memorial. I'm very patriotic, and I love my history in Scotland. I love the history in the U.S., and I love to look at all those war memorials, and it brought a lot of like honor and love for the military. I didn't mention this before. but I had a great uncle that served in World War II with the Gordon Highlanders in Burma, and he was in some POW camps, which were pretty harsh. He later on moved to New Zealand and started his life out there afterwards. Anyway, some things that I did with members in the ward, especially like on this one picture I have. This is Jackie Johnston. This might be the actual day that I did this. I love to make dinner for the members because I felt like the members fed us a lot, and I would treat them to Mexican dinner. Scotland Mexican food is horrible, and I'll even say that Utah Mexican food is horrible too. I lived in Utah for 6 years, and I did not have one good Mexican food there. And you cannot say that what's it called, Costa Vida or Cafe Rio is Mexican. Anyway, so what I would do is I'd make these Mexican dinners. I make either tacos or burritos for different members of the wards. And this is one of the instances where I did, and this is Jackie and her little brother. And we made burritos, and they loved it so much. And I just felt like members were working hard and they weren't being recognized as much. And I wanted them to feel like I knew that they were making a huge effort. The Lord loved them and he knew what they were doing. So kind of the last story of Kirkcaldy, while serving in Kirkcaldy, Elder Bednar came and visited the mission. And one thing that President Frederick talked about when I visited him, his love for Elder Bednar, he did the same thing with that list of different talks from President Nelson. He did the same thing with Elder Bednar. And I talked to him about this. Like, he wished he would have been able to stay for Elder Bednar. And this was way different from Elder Holland. He instructed us for about maybe 15, 20 minutes and then held a question and answer session. His topic of choice was about the atonement of Jesus Christ and how infinite it is. He emphasized a key point that in the Garden of Gethsemane, during the intercessory prayer, Jesus could see in a very minute moment and could feel our pains, sins, sorrows, and every burden we would feel in our lifetime. So what that meant is that Elder Bednar believed that in that whatever small moment, he could see our face and he could feel the pains, the sicknesses, weaknesses, just so that he can know how to succor us, provide healing, and provide mercy. And he talks about this in one of his books. And I want to get that book. And I know that this is true, that Jesus Christ, in whatever expanse of his ability and omnipotence, he could know who we are, especially in that Garden of Gethsemane. So one thing that I got to do was I was able to ask him a question on how he knew that the gospel of Jesus Christ was true. He explained that there wasn't this one moment, but a series of faith-building moments that reassured him that the gospel is true. I felt the same way. I never had this like moment of like, oh, this clarity. It's just this building blocks kept on building. There was so much enlightenment in that meeting. I want to be so much better, and I know that eventually I'll be where I need to be. But man, there's so many things I learned from my mission, especially moments like this. So some of the member shout outs that I have are the Binnies, the Browns, who later became a mission president of Scotland, the Lutkins, the Johnstons, the Sharfs, and the Maitlands. So you might want to try and look up the Browns and ask him about
I've sent them an email because I served in Glenrothes for 9 months, so
nice. Wow.
I know them pretty well. Also.
I thought I was there for a long in one area for a long time, but 9 months. Wow.
Yeah.
So kind of what I was saying, this is kind of the latter part of my mission. So I got a moves call and I'm thinking, well, I only have 6 weeks, so I'm probably going to stay. And I was so shocked again that I was going to be leaving Kirkcaldy to go to Alloa. And I am so grateful that I got to be in Alloa. It was such a cool place. My companion was, let me make sure that I'm on track. So my companion was Craig Jeffries. He was from Hartlepool, England, kind of the northeast part of England, on its way to Newcastle. So I don't know if he was Geordie, like he spoke Geordie or not. He was pretty well spoken for himself. I love Craig Jeffries so much. I wish I would have had more time with him. He was very cool-headed and wanted to learn a lot. To me, the Alloa Ward was so similar to the Bingham Ward. I felt right at home. There was so much historical significance there too. For me and serving in Alloa, as a kid, I had all these books. Like I could show you, like we had Willie books.
Nice.
We had all these books about Bonnie Prince Charlie. I had tea towels from my grandmother. I learned a ton about Scotland and knew how to say Edinburgh and other places.
Unlike
us other uncultured Americans.
Right.
The only guest we've had so far.
Right.
That's right.
Because, I mean, at a young age, my grandmother would be so mad if we said Edinburgh. And then, anyway, so it's just it's kind of funny. So with Alloa, geographically, it's on like let's see if I can pull it up. So you got Stirling right here, and you got the Forth River that comes through. It's such a cool river. Alloa's right here, and our area covered this portion of Alloa. Tillipody, Tillicootery, Dollar. Anyway, so I was the district leader for my last 6 weeks, and I loved serving there. Loved being a part of Falkirk and Stirlingshire, Clackbannonshire. It's just very picturesque. It was October. The leaves were changing colors. Very drastic landscapes. And like I said, the River Forth winds through and it's very dramatic. What you think you would see on like Outlander or something like that. Not that I've watched that show.
I like that you had to make sure that was clarified.
Right. Yeah. Stirling Castle was amazing. When I talk about Stirling, I always bring that up with my son, and he says that's my castle because that's his name. And then we talk about, hey, would you want to go with me to Scotland? He'd always say yes, and I'm going to take you here, I'm going to take you there, and he always says, oh, I want to go to Stirling Castle and go to the Wallace Monument and then Stirling Bridge. Anyway, since this was my last move, I wanted to make it special. So I had district meeting at the Wallace Monument. It's kind of that highest peak in that valley. And of all places where we had one of the biggest battles in Scotland that they won. I don't know if you've seen Braveheart. They talk about it. The Battle of Stirling is on this field. It didn't happen there. It was on a bridge. So the English army had huge cavalry and very mounted horse. Part of their military was mounted. And a lot of the Scottish were field artillery, or not artillery. They just were walking soldiers. Anyway, so they positioned themselves in front of the castle or on the other side to prevent the English from reaching the castle by being on the bridge. And since cavalry doesn't move very well on the bridge, they were able to take their schiltrons and their spears would kill all the horses, and they defeated them on that bridge. They lost so many people that the English had to retreat. Anyway, so that's whenever you go to Stirling, I would take a trip to that bridge and just kind of read up about that. It's really cool. So we had a district meeting up there, and just like the mission, we had our dedications. I had a dedication to this move, and wanted to make sure that we did really well, finished out strong. And so it was a really cool moment, and I'll always remember that. So Craig and I were teaching a family named the Glens. They were a lot of fun to teach. Right here, he looks like Charlie Chaplin. Just give him a hat and a cane. Anyway, we worked really hard to invite the father to be baptized, but he didn't want to. But the mom and Anita and Araminta, we called her Minty, they got baptized. The son wasn't having anything with it, but either we kept teaching them until I left to go home. And we also did a burrito night with them, but they were vegetarian. So we had to use that corn. It's like a mushroom-based meat. And it still was pretty good, but definitely not the way that I would do it. Anyway, so they got baptized. It was pretty cool. And then they took us on a trip to Dune Castle because I guess they loved us. There's the bridge. Oh, man, I don't have the picture. Anyway, Dune Castle is pretty famous. You've heard of Monty Python, the Holy Grail. Well, that's where they filmed The Taunting Frenchman, where they were hassling King Arthur and launching the farm animals.
Yes.
And, well, when we got there, they were also filming a little show called Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah, little.
So yeah, so we were told not to take pictures of the cast or the set, and I may or may not have heeded that request. So I've got some pictures of characters. They had a tent outside, and where they were all eating lunch and everything like that. We got to go in some places. They had the original coconuts from Monty Python, the Holy Grail. So of course I reenacted that. But then later on, they used it for Outlander as well. We did a lot of service projects in Alloa. So I remember one of them was we were helping Sister Watson. Her husband was the Edinburgh stake president at one point, until he was released and President Freed became the stake president. And it was a Victorian restoration. We completed a couple projects like fixing the hearth and of a fireplace, and then dug post holes in the backyard fences. We drove by it when we came back, and it looked really good. I don't know if they still own it, so I wasn't going to go chop on their door and be like, "Hey, Sister Watson," and then realize it was someone else. So anyway, Craig Jeffries and I also visited Brother John Wilkinson's paint studio out in, I think, Tulakutri, to teach us how to paint. And afterwards, he brought us home. He was Scottish, but he made us an African traditional bean soup. And he cut the loaf of bread that he got from a bakery and dug out the center and put the bean soup in it. And we kind of ate it as like a bread bowl. I did that. I took that and I did that on one of my dates with my wife. So she thought that was funny, or weird. I can't remember, but one of the most significant things I remember during this move was doing baptismal interviews. And the first one in that area, I was interviewing one of the Sterling Elders investigator. So this is kind of significant for me because it kind of taught me what not to do. So, and she answered one of the questions that would require her to meet with the mission president. I made the mistake of not referring her to the mission president right away, and it ate at me. I read the procedures over and over in my head. And maybe a couple days later, I called President Griffiths and I advised him what had happened. He counseled me and said everything will be okay, and that I need to learn from my mistake. I don't think that girl got baptized, unfortunately, because she needed to go talk to the mission president, and I don't know if that ever happened. There were other interviews after that where I had to make hard decisions. I was reading my journal. Like this one guy admitted that he was smoking still, and I had to be like, it was really tough. And I feel for bishops and I feel for mission presidents that have to say, like, let's take this back a little. So I had to say the investigators were not ready. Very hard, but I felt whole after making that decision. and I never let that eat at me ever again. One thing that I learned as I became a better missionary with members, I incorporated a tactic to hold great conversation with members in the Word during dinners. Throughout my weekly study, I'd be preparing for these dinners, and I would think of questions to come up on a doctrinal basis for the families and kind of see what would happen and just listen. And I wouldn't interject. I would just let them teach me. One of my favorite moments doing this was when we went to President Freed's house for dinner. Do I have a picture of the Freeds? Yeah, like I said, my camera is horrible, but that's President Freed and his wife and his kids. So I sincerely wanted an answer to this one question. It was from Doctrine and Covenants 62:3 about the testimony which we have borne will be recorded in heaven, and your sins are forgiven you. And I asked President Freed, how is this even possible that to bear your testimony we can be forgiven? We had a great discussion about the purifying power of the Holy Ghost, and that during the bearing of our testimonies, the Spirit can be present and all can be purified through his presence. So just amazing experiences trying to do this, trying to let others teach me. It was so humbling to be able to have a lot of those experiences with many members, to be taught as opposed to being the one teaching all the time. As my mission was coming to a close, I felt so much love from the Lord and from the people I served in Scotland. There really is no mission like ours. I talked to my siblings, and I talked to my brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws, and their mission's so different. And I felt a lot of it had to do with President Frederick. A lot of it had to do with how we as missionaries were trying very hard. And I know, Jack Bryce, you didn't serve with President Frederick, but I know that same applies. Like, our mission is so different. We talked about in other podcasts, you talked about how Scotland is very harsh. I think of it as like diluting juice. There's so much concentration of evil there. And it's hard. The members are so strong, and you have to give them so much credit because there is so much evil there. And I know that our mission is so different. I was so uncertain about my future when I got home. The mission made so much sense, even though there were rules and boundaries. It felt safe and reassuring. So those are just words I had in my journal. And I know that the gospel is true. I know that what we did as missionaries were true. And if you ever have questions about whether you served enough or you worked hard enough, I think we all need to reread the Imperfect Harvest from this last conference. My wife brought that up to me. I missed it. I was on travel. I was traveling to Alabama for work, and I missed that talk. But he talks about how no one on earth has the ability to do what Jesus does, and he makes everything right. And whatever harvest that you give is enough for the Lord because he finishes it. So I bear my testimony that I know that what we did is true. And as members of the church, we follow Jesus Christ. And I know that Joseph Smith is that prophet that helped to restore the church to the earth, and that we wouldn't be able to do this without the Book of Mormon. And I say that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. I don't know if you guys have any more questions.
Amen. There's no need for questions, Evan. This was amazing. You're easily the most prepared for this for this podcast. I have to give you some serious props with.
When I talked to President Frederick about this, I listened to Matt Fissler, and I listened to Chad Bauckham and Zach Clark, and I couldn't sleep. I stayed up till 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was on business travel, and I needed to be at work the next day. And I was just thinking, how would I do this? how can I share my experience? And this is how I couldn't do it any other way. I had to stop listening because I didn't want to like say the same stories and like be worried about myself. Anyway, but
That's
I just
awesome.
I love the mission. I love the people that I served with. I know I probably rubbed people the wrong way, but I loved every bit of it, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity that I have had. So
Yeah. I think the one thing that's really therapeutic about this podcast is an opportunity to share your story. And there's no need to apologize to people for being unapologetically you.
mhm,
And now that people have heard your background, having your great grandparents and great aunts and uncles and, just the heritage coming
mhm,
from Scotland, like, if I had that, there's no way that I would have
mhm.
thought otherwise about how incredibly special the Scotland Edinburgh Mission is.
Yeah.
So honestly, like, if anybody has questions, please reach out to Evan. We'll put you in contact with him because my goodness, like, just the way that you portrayed it was so perfect.
Mhm,
Um, you've testified well. You've brought up fun memories, but also the amazing challenges that helped you grow.
mhm,
And a lot of us think highly about our missions and think about, well, who did we teach or who did we impact, without often thinking about who impacted us.
mhm.
And you articulated it so well that there were instances where you'd sit down and you would get to be taught by these great men and women that we had the privilege of interacting with in Scotland. And so I have to, I'm going to just I'm going to bow down to you because I don't know if this is a high bar for
Mhm.
anybody else coming on the podcast. By no means is this an expectation, but Evan,
Yeah.
thank you so much for the way in which you presented your
Mhm.
mission and shared it. It was wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you so
Evan.
much. I truly am humbled. I'm grateful to at least share. And I'm grateful that you guys are doing this. I don't know any mission that's doing it myself. So I was on another business trip and I bumped into two sisters that were coming home from like Bolivia. And I was just talking about my mission. I was like, hey, I'm actually going to be doing this podcast. And they're like, podcast? Maybe we should do something like that. I was like, oh yeah, like here's the podcast. Go listen to it. So just you guys are reaching
Awesome.
out. So
No, we appreciate that. It's been a true labor of love. I mean, and think about it generationally. Like, Jack went home a year and a half, almost 2 years before you got into the mission.
mhm,
I went home, 11 months before you got there. But
mhm,
nonetheless, like, we're sitting here having a conversation about a place that we love,
mhm.
and the people that are the commonality for most of us,
Right.
as we've served in similar places and we've interacted with those incredible people there that, like you said, they are the water in the heavy evil of the
Mhm,
diluted Scotland. um, I mean, it is. It's a really tough mission, but
mhm.
more than anything, like, there is always good amongst the tough. And
Right.
so, yeah, I'm at a loss for words because you knocked it out of the park, Evan. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for coming on, and we want to express our love to you as our brother
Mhm,
in the Scotland Edinburgh Mission. This is just a huge part of why we wanted to do this, is because it's bringing us together. There's more conversations being had amongst missionaries and their companions than has been had in the last 20 some odd years for a lot of
Right.
us. And that's an incredibly important part of the camaraderie that we have. Like, we're forever
Mhm,
connected by the opportunity that we chose to go and serve the Lord, and we were just fortunate enough to do it in Scotland. So
mhm.
thank you again, Evan. We love you, and we will
Appreciate it.
say good night, and we will certainly be in touch more. All right.
All right. Cheers.
All right. Cheerio.